White Christmas is a smash hit from 1954. We're going to get into where it stands in the all-time Christmas pantheon. Directed by Michael Curtiz and starring Bing Crosby and Rosemary Clooney. We're going to get into the very first musical we've covered on the Golden Hour Film Podcast this week. Hello, yes, and welcome back to the latest film in our Christmas movie extravaganza here on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Yes, we covered Miracle on 34th Street, the original Miracle on 34th Street last week. And this week, it's White Christmas, the first musical we've covered on the podcast, starring Bing Crosby, who else? It's a musical after all, and directed, like I said, by Michael Curtiz. It's the second highest grossing film of 1954 at the box office, grossing $12 million, a hefty chunk of change back in the day. Yeah, so starring, like I said, Bing Crosby, that guy, that legend. First appearance on the podcast as well. And also starring Rosemary Clooney, aunt of George Clooney, believe it or not. Yeah, we're going to get into it this week with my co-host, Harry Bailey. How are you doing, Harry?
I'm good. Yeah, it's White Christmas. Somehow, some way, the first time I've ever watched a Bing Crosby movie in my life. I'm not really huge into musicals. I do have like favorites, don't get me wrong, but I've not seen many of the like classic musicals that exist. And therefore, this was like an interesting one. I've seen Singing in the Rain, which I can't help but compare it to. And if I'm honest, Singing in the Rain is like legitimately one of the best films America put out in the 1950s. So it was a lot to live up to, even though I think it actually came out before Singing in the Rain. But I mean, like, retrospectively, it was a lot to live up to. And yeah, Bing Crosby, kind of the king of the crooners at the time. He was like the man in that sort of genre of, I guess, performer. This film is like packed with like all the different stage talents that people kind of had back then, that people went to see. We've dancers, we've singers, we've crooners, we've comedians. We've all sorts going on in this film. Yeah, again, somehow I've never seen White Christmas before. And yeah, I think you said it in your Letterboxd review, but the film actually existed a good while before the film actually came out. It was Irving Berlin who came up with the songs. And yeah, the film is now 70 years old this year, so we're kind of celebrating a 70th anniversary of White Christmas, which is pretty cool. Have you seen this film before?
No, to be first watch of it as well. Like I said, like you, I do like musicals. Like, I'm not against musicals the way a lot of modern audiences seem to be, but it's also not something I'd necessarily seek out. Like, I'm happy to watch them, but it's not like my go-to genre by any means. Like you said, yeah, White Christmas it's not like the song was created for the film. The song had been pre-existing. I also
pretty
sang
much vice versa.
Yeah, like
the film was pretty much created for the song.
Exactly, yeah. The film was basically created because the song existed. So Bing Crosby had performed the song in a couple of previous films, Holiday Inn and Blue Skies. So yeah, everyone knows White Christmas. It probably, yeah, I don't think it's definitely one of the most recognisable and beloved Christmas songs of all time. And yeah, it pops up a few times in this film. At various junctures.
Worth mentioning Holiday Inn as well, because it stars Bing Crosby opposite Fred Astaire, who was originally written for the role of Phil in this movie, and he turned it down because he read the script and was like, this is a load of shite. And that's because supposedly the script was a load of shite the first time it was written. So bad, in fact, that Fred Astaire actually asked to leave Paramount after reading it. And so then they found a new guy to play Phil, and he was currently working on a movie with a talking donkey and allegedly caught a disease off that donkey and was then fell ill and wasn't able to shoot this either. As a result, we get Danny Kaye in this role. Yeah, he was a comedian at the time, and without spoiling anything, his character is so clearly gay.
Do you think?
Oh, convinced. I am convinced his character is gay, and they couldn't do it at the time. I'm convinced.
Maybe they just couldn't do it. But I don't know. I think he's, yeah, I don't know. I don't even want to get into the whole thing because, yeah, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. But
I'm convinced. I'd put it that way. I'll fight anyone in the comments. I am convinced.
The film is set during Christmas time during World War II at some stage in, I think, towards the end of the war anyway, and then
Yeah.
a little bit later then after that as well. So yeah, I think we just get into the narrative unless you have anything else.
Not an awful lot.
Yeah.
We just kind of figured this out when we were charging our batteries. Bing Crosby, fun fact, first man to ever get nominated for an Academy Award more than once for playing the same character.
Yes. Have you ever seen Bing Crosby in anything before this?
No, first time. I still haven't seen Going My Way, which obviously was
Yeah, I've not seen.
a big hit as well. Haven't seen it. As a matter of fact, it's kind of my first time seeing pretty much any of these actors as far as I'm aware. Obviously, I'm well aware of Michael Curtiz's films.
Yeah.
I've seen like Adventures of Robin Hood is amazing. Captain Blood is like one of the so good. Errol Flynn and Michael Curtiz just made magic every time they made a film together. And then of course, Casablanca. It's like the Casablanca of all films.
Yeah.
But yeah, besides that, yeah, Michael Curtiz, absolute legend.
Yeah, no, the only film I've seen Bing Crosby in before this was Billy Wilder. Surprise, surprise. Billy Wilder made a film called The Emperor Waltz in his native Vienna. Also, I think shot in Vienna, but yeah, it's fine. It's okay. Like, it's nothing special, to be honest. It's definitely Wilder before his. Well, I suppose it's actually after The Lost Weekend, which won Best Picture, but it's before the kind of the golden era of Billy Wilder in the 50s, and yeah, so that it's towards the late 40s. So yeah, it's okay. Like I said, it's fine. We do need to watch more Bing Crosby stuff. Michael Curtiz, I've seen a few of his films, and yeah, the guy slaps. Let's be honest. But yeah, on to White Christmas. So the opening credits state that this is the very first film ever to be shot in VistaVision, and yeah, the film does look really vibrant and really colorful,
beautiful
throughout. Yeah, it's some cool sets, and I think the way the camera is. The way VistaVision, it's the way they kind of, it's able to be shot, and especially in the dance sequences more than anything. Vera Ellen has a few incredible dance numbers that will come to. Good. Yeah, but especially like VistaVision makes it look so much more cinematic than probably a lot of dance sequences at the time. But anyway, Bob and Phil, so Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye, Bob and Phil, they're performing a show to US troops towards the end of the war. Bob sings White Christmas, is Bing Crosby after all, so yeah, it's his go-to song. He sings White Christmas as the troops listen on like intently, kind of very mournful in a way, because they've obviously been away from their families for quite a long time. They're going to miss Christmas. They're not going to be spending Christmas with their real families, even if this is their kind of family that they've come to kind of be involved with. Bob announces that Major General Thomas F. Waverly is being replaced, and I think the troops aren't too happy about it. Waverly does eventually make his presence known, because we see a little bit of a scene where he's kind of dismissed from his position, that you can see the moment where he's relieved of his duties. So he pops up, and he says the division is now under command of Major Carlton. And yeah, they all sing The Old Man to kind of see Waverly off, which he's not expecting, and it's still a really nice moment. It's one of the few songs, I think, which did work for me. Like, there's a few songs that are kind of snooze fests, if I'm honest, in this film. That's not one of them. I think that's a good song, and it is a recurring motif. We do come back to this song, yeah, at some point.
Yeah, I quite like the kind of understory of this film, which obviously it's not so much of an understory or like an undertone towards the end. It's very much a main theme. But at this point, just how the US deals with its troops once it's done with them.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of this film towards the end. But just even in the beginning, it's like, right, you're done. I'm the commanding officer now. I'm the general. So off you go, mate. And that's it. Like, there's no ceremony or anything. It's like, right, you're done, pal. And that's it. Admittedly, it's not the Christmassiest Christmas movie, if that makes sense. And yeah, they sing, as you said, they sing Waverly off. He kind of thanks them all. And then as Waverly gets into his car to head off, the place starts getting bombed. And stuff just starts blowing up everywhere. And a huge wall is about to collapse on top of Bob Wallace, who is played by Bing Crosby. And yeah, Phil jumps in and pushes him out of the way. Takes like a brick to the arm, like just like a singular brick to the arm, but yeah. the two of them then duck for cover underneath the truck whilst they're getting bombed. And yeah, Bob's like, "Oh my god, are you okay? Are you okay?" It feels like, "Yeah, no, it's just like a small scratch on my arm. If anything, it's nothing really major." But then we see him in the infirmary, and he's all bandaged up. And Bob is like, "Right, you're amazing. Thank you so much. What's your name?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm Phil." And he's like, "Well, Phil, if there's anything I can do for you, you just let me know." And Phil's like, "Well, actually,
Since you mentioned it.
I'd love it. Yeah, I'd love it. I actually kind of came up with a little number if you'd have any interest in performing it." And he's like, "Oh, right, okay, leave it with me." And he's like, "Yeah, it's a duet." And he's like, "Oh, I'm a solo artist. Thank you, though. I appreciate it." And he's like, "Oh, no, I actually have it here. I have the sheet music here if you want to read it." And he's like, Sure, I guess I'll give it a glance, but I am a solo artist." And Phil's like, "Yeah, well, I did save your life." And he's like, "Right, okay, fine, fine." So he does read it. And he kind of, I get after a little bit of back and forth, he's like, "Okay, fine, yeah, sure, we'll do your duet." Then we get a bit of a montage. It's VE Day. They've all been sent home. War's over, and then we get a big old montage of basically the two lads, Bob and Phil, working their way up. They start off on stage, then they kind of make it to radio, and then television, and then Broadway. And we just kind of watch their careers progress and progress and progress as the two become a pretty major act until they actually get to a point where they become producers. And now we're kind of in the current day of the film.
Yeah, so along the way, we've seen kind of montage. We've seen a few clips of songs called Heatwave, Let Me Sing and I'm Happy, and Blue Skies. So yeah, just mention the songs. Again, nothing that's necessarily special in any of those three songs, but anyway. So then we cut to the present day, like Harry said, and the guys are kind of getting ready for a show, producing a show, and they're getting all their kind of paperwork done, and all the backstage people kind of coming up and asking them questions and trying to get all the clerical stuff done. But Phil thinks that Bob is being a bit of a curmudgeon. So he says, "Look, I want to set you up on a date." And this leads to the two of them having an argument. Probably not the first time they've had such an argument. Bob thinks Phil is holding the whole "save my life" thing over his head, which he very much is. pretty unashamedly as well.
For pretty much the rest of the film.
Yeah, pretty unashamedly. Like, he's not even pretending otherwise. But Phil thinks Bob is lonely and kind of sad and unhappy. And he's like, "Look, you need a woman in your life to kind of give you. You're married to the job. You kind of need a bit of a kind of you need something else to focus on away from the job because it's actually getting you down." He says, "Bob, you're a workaholic and you're only interested in the job." So then a pal from the army, it turns out, has written to them, and he says, "Look, I have two sisters. Will you come along and check out their act and maybe have a spot for them?" So they're like, "Okay, we better go along to this and see what these two girls are made of." So yeah, they go to is it New York?
I know. No, they go to Florida.
That's it. Yeah, Florida. They go to Florida.
Yeah, they
check
go to
out
a place called Novellos in Florida.
That's the one. Yeah. So they go to Florida. Yeah, to check out Judy and Betty.
Yeah, and Judy and Betty are the sisters of a particularly ugly guy who they were in the army with, and they keep saying, like, "Fuck, do you remember what that guy looked like? Like, imagine what his sisters look like. Like, I can't believe that guy like has siblings. What does that even look like?" It is kind of funny, but then, like, not to get too ahead of myself, but they then show a picture of him.
Yeah,
he's the most normal looking guy ever.
I was literally about to say, it's like you show a picture and he just looks like a regular Joe. It's like they didn't even bother giving him like a large prosthetic nose or something, like to make him or a bunch of spots or something.
Yeah. But anyway, so they get to this place and they're like, "Right, best case scenario, we end up doing like an act with these guys. Worst case scenario, we'll just give them a bit of advice, but we'll come and support anyway." Meanwhile, backstage, Judy and Betty get told that the two lads who are now quite big deal in that industry are at the show, and Betty's like, "Oh my god, like what are they? I can't believe they're here." And he's like, "Oh yeah, apparently your brother like sent them a letter or whatever." And she's like, "Oh, amazing." And then your man leaves, and she says to Judy, like, "That's so good of him." And Betty's like, "Yeah, that is really good of him. I guess we'll really have to like turn up the performance tonight." And Betty is like, "Well, actually, I don't know if you realize, but the last letter I got said that our brother is actually in Alaska."
which wasn't a
So he
US
obviously,
state at the time.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's out of
So he
country.
didn't write them a letter actually, and Judy's like, okay, yeah, so maybe I did invite them, and she's like, oh fuck, you put like so much pressure on us now, and they kind of agree. It's like, right here, similar to the lads. It's like, right, best case scenario, maybe they love our act and we get to be a part of their show. Worst case scenario, maybe they'll still give us some advice. And the two of them go out and they perform their act. And yeah, one of the many instances in the film where it's gas because like the costuming for the two girls is so on point, and then the costuming for the two lads is so horrendous.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like none of the lads' outfits make like no sense. There's no color coordination. Some of the stuff doesn't even like fit them. Whereas like the girls are in like constantly, they're in like lavish dresses which are like really well color coordinated, and they like work because they're like different colors to all the backgrounds, so they stand out more. Especially in the Vista Vision, it looks phenomenal. But yeah, just funny to me that their costumes are so on point and the lads just really aren't.
Yeah, the song is called Sisters, by the way, they sing. It's a pretty good song. It's one of the better ones, I'd say, in the film. But Phil notices that Bob is just staring at Betty the whole time, Rosemary Clooney. He notices that he's kind of fixated and he's drawn towards Betty. So he gets kind of happy because, like, maybe finally he might kind of have a romantic interest. So the four of them grab dinner after their performance and they all start to kind of introduce each other. So Judy and Phil go to dance. They start to pair off because they know that, because Phil knows that Bob is into Betty. So he's hoping that something might happen if he kind of leaves the two of them alone. But then Betty comes clean about Judy being the one to actually write the letter, which she's assuming that Bob is going to be upset about. What Bob's like, look, you did what you had to do. You were looking out for yourself. Everyone has an angle, is what he says. Like, you just had an angle. And Betty is she's offended by this because she's like, what do you mean have an angle? Like, we're not selfish people. It's just whatever.
Yeah.
So they start to kind of clash and butt heads at that point.
Yeah,
And then
quite
Judy,
cynical.
yeah, very cynical. So Judy and Phil they start to get drawn towards. This is what I mean about. I think that Judy is into Phil for sure, and Phil probably is into Judy without even realizing it. So look, who knows? It's the 19th.
Maybe.
They weren't as like open minded back then, maybe. So good for Phil. He can be into whoever he wants. But anyway, the two of them kind of dance together and they start to sing "The Best Things Happen While You're Dancing," which is a really fun, kind of vibrant, energetic dance number.
One of the many times where she's just so
she's dancing
classic
circles around
dancing.
everyone. Yeah.
And I was gonna say, in fairness to him though, because like he didn't really have much, as far as I'm aware, he didn't have much dancing experience prior to this film.
He
does kind of hold his own.
Yeah, it keeps up to an extent for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not in any of the jazz numbers later on.
She
but like
she
in
was
this
a
one anyway.
she was a radio.
He is capable.
Yeah, like she'd been dancing her whole life. Vera Ellen.
Yeah.
She was a Radio City Rockette, which is obviously a big deal at the time. So yeah, like she was pretty much a master of the craft, and we can see that in a few scenes in the film. She's really great. So yeah, Bob and Phil, turns out the girls are kind of getting shaken down by someone because they owe maybe a little bit of money. They're being threatened with the sheriff. They don't pay $200 for a damaged rug that they had in their apartment. So the lads are like, okay, we'll help them escape. So they help them get out the window, and we cut to the lads dressing up as Betty and Judy. Dressing up, well, not even dressing up. It's clear like they're not even in the same costumes or anything, but they're just trying to buy time. Turns out this whole scene, by the way, is Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye were kind of goofing around on set one day and doing the whole routine and having a blast. And Michael Curtiz was so enamored and so kind of taken away with it. So he thought it was a lot of fun, very entertaining. Guys like, okay, I need to kind of put that in the film somewhere. So you can actually see Bing Crosby in particular, like pretty much breaking character a few times in this dance sequence. He's just laughing his head off. So yeah, it is a fun scene of the two lads just kind of shooting the breeze and having this fun performance to the same song we just heard 5 minutes earlier, Sisters. The whole crowd's, they can tell like they're two guys, but they're just having a laugh. They're kind of it is kind of a fun scene, very energetic scene.
Yeah, they're buying time so that the girls can escape. Yeah. And at first they basically get your man, who's like the stagehand, to just try and distract the sheriff, but he can't anymore. So they're like, right, how do we distract the sheriff? Well, the show must go on because the manager of the place is like, you can't arrest them until the show's over. Like, otherwise, I'm going to have people asking me for money back for tickets and stuff. So at least wait until the show's over before you arrest anyone. So they're like, right, we got to keep this show going, lads. And yeah, whilst they're doing this as well, Phil actually slipped their 2 train tickets to the girls so that they can escape. And they're going to Vermont anyway, and the lads were going to New York, and it's on the same train line, so it kind of works out for them. But after their number, the 2 lads then do a runner, and they hop out the window and they hail a taxi, and they get in the taxi. They get from the taxi then to the train. They hop on the train, and then Bob's like, right, quick, give your man the tickets. And yeah, Phil plays dumb and pretends he's lost the ticket, so that Bob has to then buy more tickets. And they lose their luxurious room on the train, and instead they have to slum it in the lovely bar on the train. And the 2 go for a drink, and then yeah, pretty much not long after,
Bob clocks.
Bob clocks the plan, because Phil was trying to get him to buy a ticket to Vermont, even though Bob's like, what are you on about? We literally have a job in New York. Like, why would I buy tickets to Vermont? That's just stupid. And he's like, I hear it's lovely this time of year. And he's like, yeah, but like, we have a job in New York. What are you talking about? And then when they get there, the 2 girls kind of overhear everything, so they come out and join them for a drink. And Bob's like, oh, where are you guys off to? And they're like, oh, we're off to Vermont. And then it's like, oh, the wool gets pulled from his eyes, and he's like, okay, I see what you're doing here, Phil. And he just says, yeah, well, I hear it is lovely this time of year. And then they sing a snow. Pretty much, yeah. They sing a song about snow.
Yeah, literally called Snow.
Snow, lots of times. And then the jingle to this song, anytime anyone mentions snow for the rest of the film, plays really quietly in the background. Snow.
Yeah, it's probably I don't know if this song was a bit like, a bit cloying to me or something. I just didn't really, I wanted to like it more than I did, but anyway, look, it's a musical, you're always going to have songs that you like more than others. So Phil and Judy then conspire to set Betty and Bob up. They're like, okay, we need to get these 2 together because it's going to help both of our careers, and it's going to help us both kind of just kind of have a better life, really. Phil doesn't have to kind of worry about Bob so much. She doesn't have to worry about Betty so much. So yeah. They get off the train in Vermont, where they're expecting it because they had sang a whole song about snow. Vermont's supposed to be snowy that time of year. They're expecting it to be full of snow, and lo and behold, it's not. It's quite sunny outside, quite mild weather. So obviously they're quite devastated. So when they get to the hotel that they're meant to be staying at, turns out the girls' gig that they had booked there has been cancelled. And yeah, they're obviously not happy, but then just as they're kind of about to leave, or just they're about to like just kind of go and whatever and drown their sorrows, who turns up but General Waverly from the lads' army? And yeah, they're very, very happy to see Waverly.
Yeah, so it turns out obviously this this inn, the Pine Lodge, I believe it's called, is failing, as are most places, because they haven't had snow since Thanksgiving, and they're just not getting the tourists. Their whole thing is literally that they're like a ski lodge, and there's no snow. Yeah. So yeah, the secretary literally makes a joke about the fact that they're using the ski lift as a washing line at the minute, because like nobody's using it. And Waverly's granddaughter also works there. She's not really a prominent character, but it's worth mentioning for later. And yeah, Waverly is he's in a bit of a bother, although he'll never admit it. Yeah. He's kind of sank all of the money that he has into this place, because he's clearly a man who doesn't want to retire. He doesn't want to sit down and relax, and especially after the war, he's a veteran. He needs to make his money somehow, and as a result, he bought this in, and the lack of snow has kind of fucked him. So the general takes one look at the 2 sisters, and he's like, right, we're actually not going to cancel your gig. You seem like lovely people. We'll still let your gig go on regardless of how many people are in attendance. And they do their gig then that night, and there's literally like 20 people in attendance. It's quite sad. Yeah. And afterwards, the lads and the sisters meet up, and they basically decide amongst themselves that, one, the sisters feel terrible taking his money, but he won't not give it to them. Yeah. And also the lads are like, right, we need to help Waverly get back on his feet. We owe him so much. He was like the coolest general to work under in the army. We owe it to him. And they have a funny back and forth then, where Phil's trying to come up with ideas as to how they can get the place back on his feet. And one of the girls goes, "Oh, why don't we get Wallace and Davis?" And he's like, "No, they're too big." Oh wait.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and yeah, that's the plan. Wallace and Davis, the two producers, Bob and Phil, are going to put on a grand L show to try and draw as many people as they can to Waverly's Inn to try and get them some sort of money for the Christmas that's coming up.
yeah. They let the housekeeper in and Waverly's granddaughter in on this plan, which obviously they're very excited about. But yeah, it's going to cost a hefty chunk of change for the lads because they're going to be footing the bill all for themselves, all by themselves. But yeah, it's going to be held on Christmas Eve, so they lied to Waverly about the purpose of the show. They're like, listen, we want to put on a show, but they don't really tell them the specifics about what it's for. They're just like, listen,
Yeah, they kind of make it out as if they're just doing rehearsals.
just doing, yeah, for their own kind of TV program or whatever. So then we get a montage of the whole crew then coming down and setting up for the show, and the gang then perform "I'd Rather See a Minstrel Snow," Mr. Bones, and Mandy. 3 new songs. And then there's a great dance sequence to the last song I mentioned there, Mandy. Vera Ellen, it's just probably 3 or 4 minutes of Vera Ellen just absolutely killing it on the dance floor. She is
insane dancer.
She's
insanely good.
She's incredible. What a dancer. So yeah, then a little bit later, then Betty and Judy get ready for bed, and Judy convinces Betty to go eat. Obviously, Judy has an ulterior motive. She knows that Phil is going to persuade Bob to be down in the kitchen as well. So they're like, why don't you go down and have a little bit of food to eat? It's been proven that you can sleep better on a full stomach. I'm not sure that's true, but anyway. So yeah, Betty's like, okay, fair enough, I'll go down and grab a bite. And when she goes down there, Bob and her, they get to chatting, and they start to kind of flirt a little bit back and forth, and they start to sing "Count Your Blessings" instead of "Sheep," which, by the way, was an Oscar-nominated song. The only song from the film that was Oscar-nominated. So that's worth something. I'm not sure it was. It's a fine song. It's decent, but I'm not sure it's that.
No, I quite like that one.
It's okay. Like I don't know. I think there is a song coming up soon, maybe. But anyway, that's okay. Like, it's not a bad song.
Yeah.
So a little bit later, then once the song is over, they kiss. But they're interrupted by General Waverly, and Judy and Phil are watching on, and they're pleased about their scheming. Kind of, it looks like they're on the right track. It looks like their scheming is going to pay off after all.
So the following morning, Waverly basically lets Bob know that he actually wishes to rejoin the army. It's kind of a cry for help because Bob kind of says to him, "Would you not go over and play horseshoes with the lads over there?" And he's like, "I'm not that fucking old, lad. I've still got a lot left in the tank, and I don't want to waste it playing games and sitting on a bench. I feel like I can still contribute, and I want to contribute. They can deploy me in any country. I'll do anything for the army." Basically, the guy just wants something to do because he was cast aside by the army and feels somewhat forgotten about. And literally that morning, Bob actually collected the post and found a letter for Waverly, and he handed it to him, and he's like, "Oh, this may be the letter you're waiting for from the army." And he opens it, and he's like, "Oh man, I actually left my glasses behind. Do you mind reading it?" And it's funny, he opens, he's like, "Oh, Waverly, you son of a," and Waverly cuts him off. He's like, "Actually, skip that bit. Go to the next paragraph." And he's like, "Oh, right, okay." And then he reads this pretty sad kind of message. The guy's trying to let him off easy.
Yeah.
He's like, "Listen, you've done so much for your country, don't get me wrong. But aren't you just lucky that you get to retire? You fortunate thing. Anyway, the kids are doing great." And then he's like, "Right, okay, I don't want to hear the rest of it. The rest of it's just going to be about his family. He's obviously telling me that the army don't want me anymore. I may as well go over and learn how to play horseshoes." And he gets up and he wanders over, and Bob's kind of feeling he's in his feels, let's just say. And he goes and he meets Phil, and he's like, "Right, I have another crazy plan." And he's like, "What's the plan?" And he's like, "I think we need to get the lads from the 151st Division to come to the show." And Phil's like, how is that even possible? Do you realize how short notice this is? And he's like, "No, like, for the lads who live in the New England area, it actually wouldn't be that much of a big deal. And if we manage to get it on television, I think there actually would be a way of getting all the rest of the lads. I have contacts through the army, a guy called Ed Harrison, who's got a big show. I'll go on Ed Harrison's show, or I'll try and get a message at least on Ed Harrison's show. to try and convince the lads to come down here, just to let Waverly know that he's not been forgotten. And Phil's like, right, okay, best of luck, pal.
Yeah, Phil's kind of, he's reluctant at first, but then he's like, why didn't I think of that? So
Yeah.
does give Bob kind of reluctant praise. Then we cut to more rehearsals for the big show. Phil performs choreography, which is an amusing song. Probably, in my opinion, the best song outside of White Christmas and The Old Man. That's just my personal opinion. Bob chats to Ed, who's an army buddy, on the phone, and as Harry said, he offers to show the whole performance on TV if they can get it arranged in time. So, but he's basically, they hatched this whole plan to, unbeknownst to General Waverly, to kind of again broadcast the fact they're going to be doing this performance on TV, so that everyone from the 151st Division can see it and come down, because they're like, listen, they're 100% got to come down because this man means so much to everyone, all of us. But the housekeeper, turns out she gets the wrong end of the stick, because she overhears the kind of phone conversation between Bob and Ed. And she thinks that they're basically only doing it because they want to make a fuck ton of money off of Waverly's obviously poor times in life, his difficult position. She's disgusted by the callousness of the whole kind of charade, and she's like, they're only doing it for their own purposes. So she kind of tells Betty about this, and Betty's disgusted, so she confronts Bob, and she's like, listen, I can't be part of this anymore. Bob is obviously crestfallen because he thought they were kind of starting to grow closer, but also means that kind of a big attraction, a big kind of very talented person isn't now going to be involved in the show as well, so it's a double whammy.
Yeah, this whole bit is often why I don't really get into like screwball comedies, because there's always kind of a plot thread or whatever that makes two characters fall out, where if one of them had just called the other one out about it, the whole conflict gets resolved, and yet instead it like goes into it becomes a whole thing then, and they like divide or whatever. It's like such a prominent thing in like the old screwball comedies. Some of them do it better than others. Like Bringing Up Baby is a fantastic example. I love that movie. But in this case, I actually think the housekeeper is a good comic relief. I think she has some good lines, don't get me wrong. But yeah, the whole busybody character who gets involved, and I kind of just the crosses of the wires and people don't communicate to each other. I know it's supposed to be, but it can just be a bit annoying because it feels like it is just dragging the plot out a bit. But it doesn't feel like necessarily like the best way to add a level of conflict to the situation. Anyway, that's just me. But basically Betty's like, no, okay, Bob's incredibly selfish, but I'm not going to ask him if it's true or not. I'm just going to believe this woman who said it's true. And even the woman who overheard it on the phone doesn't like call Bob out on it. The only thing that they have to support their theory is they kind of accidentally get a confession out of Phil, even though Phil has no idea what he's confessed to. Because he comes over after this whole confrontation, and he's like, "Oh, did he call Ed?" And they're like, "Yeah," and he's like, "And he's gonna be on TV." Yeah. And he's like, amazing. And then Phil kind of walks off, and the two of them kind of look at each other and it's like, that fucking evil bastard. And he's just kind of like happily skipping along, totally oblivious to what he's just done. But the wedge dividing Bob and Betty has been put in, and we're meant to get two characters fairly divided now.
100%, yeah. So Judy and Phil get to talking, and they're like, well, I think Judy is definitely more into Phil than he is into her. Maybe like when she suggests that they should get married, I think it's definitely partly because she wants her sister to be to find a man, but it's also because she's secretly in love with Phil. That's my reading of the situation anyway. But look, they're like, we should get engaged, and Phil takes quite a long time to kind of pick up on her hints. He's like, no, I'm not the marrying kind. But eventually he's like, okay, maybe it would kind of persuade Bob then to settle down as well. So they have a large party with the crew, and they kind of announce that they're engaged, and everyone's kind of happy for them. Obviously Bob is delighted. So they dance together to the best things happen while they're dancing. So it's the song that they had danced to earlier in the film, which comes up again. Um, so Bob and Betty then chat and they try to at least be civil to each other. But then she storms out because again she just can't forgive him for this, what she believes to be this big betrayal of Waverly.
Yeah, and we get another funny line from Phil. So Phil obviously announces his engagement after stuttering his way through a speech because he hates this whole thing to begin with anyway. And everyone like congratulates him. And there's this one woman, we haven't even touched on her. She's like a semi-recurring character, just that she's like obsessed with Phil, and she just seems to be at every gathering. And she comes up to him, she's like, "Oh my god, I wish something like that would happen to me." And he's like, "Yeah, so do I." Basically insinuating like, "Stay the fuck away from me." Like, how are you in every scene? It was a pretty funny one-liner again from Phil. But yeah, Bob's like, "Oh, you crazy kids," as they used to say back then, and he toasts to their happiness or whatever. And at the same time, yeah, interestingly enough, again, just through lack of communication, Betty's like, "Oh, I'm so happy for you," to her sister, but she again fails to mention to her sister that she thinks that these lads are planning to
Yeah.
actually con, even though she's like marrying. Anyway, so the two have their dance, the newly engaged couple, and yeah, it's funny as well because Waverly's like, "Well, are you not going to kiss the bride?" And he's like, "Oh shit, yeah." And he gives her a kiss, and then he gives her another kiss, and he says some sort of line because prior, he kept comparing her to his cocker spaniel, and then he's like, "Oh, actually, maybe you are somewhat better than my cocker spaniel." After kissing her, but yeah, in the kitchen, Bob and Betty have another interaction where Bob toasts to everyone's good health, pretty much, and that things can kind of be like things could be the way they were the night before. He doesn't really understand why she's being so distant with him today, but if they could just drop everything, instead of, I don't know, talking it out, that they just toast to good health, and she refuses to toast and she storms out. She just leaves her sister's engagement and goes straight to bed. And fast forward a tiny bit into the future that evening, and Judy comes to bed, and she's talking to her sister and basically being like, "Hey, now that I'm engaged, you can get engaged or do whatever you want because you don't have to look after me because I have a man to look after me now," and whatever. And yeah, Betty's kind of pretending to be asleep, but she's actually like crying in her bed. And Judy's like, "Right, okay, if you're asleep, you're asleep, whatever. I'm sorry."
Judy's
And
also like,
yeah,
well, maybe we can go our separate ways now. Like we can, the
yeah,
act we could also just do our own thing, which makes Betty even more, feel more like shit.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, this it's one of the many films that exist where if like two characters just sat down and had a chat, all the conflict would just be resolved. But they don't. They don't sit down
Yeah.
and have a chat, and the plot continues.
Yeah, so the next day, Betty gets a ride to the train station from Waverley. He's like, listen, you just need to talk to Bob and sort this thing out. The two of us can sort this thing out.
Amen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now she remains coy because she obviously doesn't want to give the game away about the whole like plan that they have, but she thinks obviously that's set on selfish purposes on their part. So she doesn't want to let kind of make him feel bad either. So she doesn't say anything about the whole performance situation. She just like, I just need to get away from this town. Like I just need to kind of do my own thing now.
Yeah, she got a job in New York.
Yeah, she got a job in New York. She was like, look, I have this letter for Judy. Will you just give it to her when you see her? Like, so he's like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Then Bob, by happenstance, Bob is there kind of sorting through a few like arrangements that he needs to get done. He sees Betty at the last second at the board of the train, so he runs over to her and he's like, oh, I'm really sorry, like whatever I did, I'm just an idiot, like I'm really sorry. But she again just thinks that she thinks that his character has been revealed and that he's a very selfish person. She doesn't want anything to do with him, so she just gets on the train. She kind of, yeah, she doesn't really want to engage with him, so they're further apart than ever at this point.
Yeah, and Waverly gets the letter to Judy, and she opens it and she reads it, and she discovers that her sister has gone to New York. And yeah, she's, I don't know, she's clearly not doing too well because she just upped and left without saying anything. So she says it to Phil, And she brings Phil then to Bob, and the two of them confess to Bob that the whole engagement's actually fake and was just a ploy for Bob to end up somehow having a better shot at Betty, and that's why they got engaged. And Bob's like, you are terrible people. First of all, you just like emotionally manipulated a lot of people, and you should be horsewhipped. Especially you, Phil. You should actually be horsewhipped twice. And Phil's like, yeah, no, I'm sorry. And he's like, right, well, I'm off to New York. I'm going to explain everything to her, and maybe she'll hear me out, because I just don't understand why after the night that we kissed that this woman now hates me, won't speak to me, doesn't want to see me. So I got to go to New York. And as he's leaving, he turns and feels like, what can I do? Like, I'm so sorry. And he's like, right, do you know what you can do? The general actually watches the Ed Harrison show every night. Which begs the question, like, would he not have just gone on a different show and gotten like Ed Harrison to put him on a different show? But anyway, you need to make sure that the general doesn't watch the Ed Harrison show tonight. And he's like, I will do anything. If I have to break an arm or break a leg or whatever, I'll do it. And he's like, yeah, just don't break anything important.
Yeah,
and,
those lead to some fun slapstick moments for sure. That.
Yeah. And yeah, he heads off to New York then to see Betty, and Betty gets her one solo number of the film, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah. By the way, did you mention about Bob realizing the engagement is a phony all along? So once he gets to New York, she performs "Love You Didn't Do Right by Me," which is funny because, well, not funny, but it's kind of apropos. It's on the nose. Yeah, it's ironic because of what she's going through. She actually initially reluctant to sing it once she realizes Bob is there, but she does sing it and performs it well. Afterwards, Bob and Betty, they do start to chat, and he's like, "Look, their engagement was phony all along, wouldn't you believe?" And he's like, oh, please just give me another chance, I can make it right this time. But just that moment, Ed arrives at the very wrong moment when it kind of looks like he might be.
Yeah, she's starting to kind of
come around
see that he is actually not a bad person because he travelled all the way to New York for this. And then Ed comes over,
Ed comes over and, just kind of whisks Bob away because they need to have a chat about kind of their plans, which, again, makes her feel even more like shit. So, we cut back to Vermont and we get, like I said, fun slapstick shenanigans. The housekeeper, Waverly's granddaughter, and Judy and Phil kind of all conspiring so that Waverly won't sit down and watch the Ed Harrison show that evening. But it does lead to some fun slapstick moments.
Yeah, it does.
From Phil in particular. It's probably one of the funniest scenes in the film, I'd say. It does lead to some funny moments. Then we cut back to Ed introducing Bob on his show, on the Ed Harrison show that evening, where they just about managed to get Waverly away from the TV set. And Bob's like, listen, the members of the 151st kind of battalion, not too sure of the phrase.
Division.
Sorry?
Division,
yeah. Members of the 151st Division, anyone watching this, I want you all to come to Vermont on Christmas Eve and come because we need to do this thing for our leader, General Waverly. And he starts to sing.
He sings a genuinely somewhat like emotional song about how whether you're 1, 2, 3 or 4-star general, the US government forgets about you when you're done. However, it's kind of on the rest of the soldiers to make sure that their generals don't feel forgotten about. And this Christmas, that's basically his Christmas wish, is that they can all band together one last time to make sure that their general doesn't feel forgotten.
Yeah, it's one of the better songs. What can you do with a general? It's called. Yeah, Betty watches on. She's watching it that evening as well, and she realizes that kind of Bob is actually a very kind-hearted person. This is what he was so secretive about. Like, he wasn't trying to do it for selfish reasons. He's actually doing it out of the goodness of his heart. He's not financially motivated all along. So, yeah, she obviously then, you can see the wheels in her head start to turn. She's like, I need to get back to Vermont to be part of this performance myself. So yeah, Operation Waverly, as they dub it, it's a go. So the army, again, a great kind of a scene, little montage of everyone kind of packing up in a hurry, going towards Vermont for Christmas Eve, because they want to be there for General Waverly. And Bob is like, this is what the plans are. That evening, they're obviously getting ready for the show in secret. He's like, okay, we're running through the whole kind of order of what they want the show to be in, costumes and preparation and all this stuff. Then Betty returns to the hotel, much to Judy's relief.
Yeah, she returns to the inn and Bob doesn't know, which is pretty cool. And then we get, for me, genuinely, again, one of the most powerful moments of the film. So after the housekeeper purposefully, mistakenly mislays the general's two suits, all he's left with is his army uniform. And his granddaughter is like, "Oh, please, granddad, will you just wear your uniform?" And he's like, "Absolutely not. I'm not. I can't put it back on. Like they've rejected me. Like I just can't wear it." And she's like, "Well, okay, I'll go down and tell them that you're not going to the show." And she goes downstairs, and yeah, for the next two scenes, it's just genuinely beautiful. It's almost like a reverse of like a father seeing his daughter as the bride for the first time. The granddaughter sees her grandfather
Yeah,
Waverly come from the top of the stairs in his full uniform, and he's like, "Well, I wasn't gonna go in my dressing gown now, was I?" And she's just like in awe of her grandfather, and she runs up the stairs and hugs him, and the two walk through arm in arm again, almost like reverse, a role reversal out of marriage. And as she walks him through this arch, all the lads start cheering. And yeah, again, just a really great bit of like facial acting there from Waverly, where you can just see he's so taken aback, because we see kind of a wide shot of the room is just packed with the 151st Division. It's clearly a lot of people in that division. And then yeah, they start singing again, and yeah, it's that really powerful
yeah.
song from the beginning.
The Old Man, yeah, it's the same song
Yeah,
from earlier they sang from. Really
yeah,
emotional
it's so
stuff.
good.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny then because you can see his face then, or you can see his emotions starting to get the better of him, but then he kind of goes back into general mode where he's trying to act tough and he's trying to act like kind of yeah, like strong.
Yeah,
So
he's
he
like
starts,
slagging one guy for wearing a necktie and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
So he starts to drill the troops in a way that he would have as obviously their leader, but you can tell it's in like in a really good spirit, and he's like thanks everyone, like that you can tell it really touched him. So it's a big ass cake that they got from him as well. He goes over, he blows out the candles on the big cake, and then everyone kind of cheers, and everyone starts to mingle and obviously reminisce and start to like they probably haven't seen each other in a long time as well, so they start to like catch up and stuff. Then the four leads, so Judy, Betty, Bob, and Phil, they come out and they start to sing. G always shows back in the army, which is a fun song. And yeah, Bob, you can tell Bob was actually, I think he was expecting to be only three of them, because when he sees Betty, then you can see his kind of face. He's really surprised and taken aback, but yeah, he's pretty happy to see Betty again.
yeah, and then they round things off with another rendition of White Christmas. They're all in their Santa outfits. Again, just another moment where the Vista Vision just looks fucking great.
Yeah, because
The coloring work that they did is so good.
yeah, it's brilliant. Because
And
they weren't expecting it to be snowing on Christmas. The whole thing is that no one was expecting snow. So once it actually does snow, which was very unexpected, yeah, it kind of puts a nice little cap on the whole evening. And yeah, then they do then round it off with White Christmas, title of the film, obviously. But yeah, it's a fun performance. Like obviously, Bing Crosby did it by himself in the first scene, whereas obviously this is very much a group effort in this particular case.
yeah, and I'm sure you can imagine what happens.
Yeah,
Big ensemble cast. They sing White Christmas. Everybody cheers. Bing Crosby gets the girl and he kisses her. He kisses Betty. Bob and Betty kiss. And then it's kind of like Phil and Judy are like, "Well, guess we kiss too." And they kind of kiss behind them. It's pretty funny. And then everybody cheers. The end.
yeah,
White Christmas.
yeah. What do you think of White Christmas, Harry? What's your overall thoughts?
Yeah, I liked it for sure. I think yeah, I think maybe a similar stance as yourself. I think some of the songs are definitely better than others. That's normally the
Yeah,
case in musicals. Some of them are just better than others, and the others, it's like, yeah, maybe if those songs were better, I'd love this film. I don't love it. I do like it though. Don't get me wrong. I particularly love just how it looks. The coloring is amazing in this film. It's a beautiful film to just look at. I think yeah, the dancing from Judy is like so good. Like every single time she dances, whether it's like jazz or whatever, every dance number she does is like an absolute highlight. And yeah, the whole subplot of how the US government mistreats its veterans and forgets about them was genuinely quite empowering. I've nothing to do with the army. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone. I don't have any family in the army or anything. But like, I just, or at least not that I know of. But it still managed to touch me. Don't get me wrong. I just thought it was a really interesting way to go about a Christmas movie, was to kind of, you get them in for the Christmas part, but actually you want to talk about something else. You actually want to talk about how the government mistreats its troops and its veterans. And yeah, I feel like that message will always ring true in America. But yeah, overall I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think it's a good film. It's a good Christmas film. It's not in my favorites list or anything. I feel like a lot of people who it is a favorite of, it's genuinely for a sentimental reason, and that's normally the case with most people's favorite Christmas movies. They're normally for sentimental reasons. It's a very sentimental subgenre, and yeah, I don't have any personal attachment or affiliation to this movie, but I still think it's a good movie. I still gave it a 3 out of 5. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was decent. Like I don't know, it definitely wouldn't be one of my favorite Christmas movies I've ever seen, but it's fine. Like, there's a couple of good songs in there. Vera Ellen's dancing as Judy is genuinely phenomenal. Like, I wish I could do half of what she's able to do.
She's so good.
It looks great. Like, the VistaVision, it does really look like lavish and yeah, like spectacular in certain scenes and just colourful and vibrant. I just think in the film, like, the first scene is brilliant when they're all kind of getting together and they're singing Waverly Off. From that moment up until the moment where Waverly walks in, I think there's good stuff, but there's also a lot of kind of meandering stuff. It kind of, the plot feels a bit too aimless at times, just repetitive. He kind of does repeat a lot of the same story beats over and over and over again. The leads, like, I think they're fine. Like, it's okay, but I wouldn't necessarily say any of the 4 are amazing. I guess if I do think Rosemary Clooney is probably decent as Betty is probably would be my standout, but again, I don't think anyone's sensational by any means. As far as the militaristic aspect goes, like, again, I'm not like big into the military. I'm not a big military guy, and obviously we don't even have like a big military from that sense in Ireland. But like,
yeah,
I'm not like pro-military in the sense of like, from that point of view, but I do like what you said. It's not necessarily pro-military. It is quite critical, but it is pro kind of what it can do in terms of these guys do all have a big brotherhood together. Like, they are each other's family in a way. They're just a different family, a different kind of family. So from that point of view, it does kind of, yeah, the final 10 minutes or so does really kind of, it did get me in the heartstrings. It did kind of move me. And I think it's worth it is worth the kind of meandering, aimless kind of plot. It did kind of save it for me. I was wavering towards giving it like a kind of a lower grade, but it did just about kind of save it for me at the end, the last 10 minutes or so. So I gave it 2.5, which isn't amazing. Obviously, it's not necessarily the best rating to give it, but I think it's just about, I'm just about happy enough that I watched it, and it's like, I'm not necessarily sure I'll watch it again, but I think it's just about satisfying enough watch, I think, for what it is. And yeah, that's White Christmas. So it is Christmas time. Bear in mind, we're recording this, by the way, a couple of weeks in advance. So I'm going to ask what we've been watching lately. So if there's not necessarily a bunch of Christmas movies in there, that's probably why, just so everyone knows. Yeah, what have you been watching lately, Harry?
Yeah, so as of recording this, obviously, the last couple of films I watched, I did a triple feature. One of them I'd seen before.
Nice.
I watched 3 films that are intrinsically linked with each other. I watched Paddington in Peru, then Gladiator 2, and then The Iron Claw. 3 films that couldn't be more similar. So yeah, Paddington in Peru. Yeah, I loved the first 2 Paddington movies so much. I genuinely think, like, I this isn't like hyperbole. I genuinely think Paddington 2 is like an actual masterpiece. It's like it's genuinely maybe the greatest children's film ever made.
It's one of the greatest films of the 21st century. Like, it's top 10 for me, and it's not even a question.
Yeah, Paddington 2 is like a legitimately amazing film, and you can feel that Paul King didn't direct Paddington in Peru.
Yeah, it's got some of the same like offbeat humor, but it is missing something, I think.
Yeah, it's lacking Paul King's kind of flair that he
Yeah.
provides to his movies. You can also feel it in Wonka. The Paul King isms are always great, and they get at your heartstrings. Paul King is so good at getting at your heartstrings throughout a film, and this film, don't get me wrong, it gets at your heartstrings, but predominantly in the final act, and that's just because of that bear. God, I love that bear. I just wish I really, really, really want to see that bear on that. Have you seen the thing in Scotland that they have where he's just sitting on a bench?
No.
There's like actually like a statue of like a bench with like a life-size Paddington just eating a sandwich, and you can just go and sit on it. It's just in public, and I will go there one day. That'll be my pilgrimage. But in the meantime, I have Paddington in Peru, which I did like. I actually did really like. It's just not Paddington 2, but then like how could it be? Gladiator 2, I think I liked more than most people. I actually thought it was really good. Partially because I really liked the first one, and I don't hate that it is really similar to the first one. It's not as good as the first one, don't get me wrong, but I think it does enough to validate itself, particularly through Denzel Washington's character. He's so good in this film.
Yeah.
And I feel like just through Denzel Washington's character alone being introduced into the canon, it validates this film enough. And obviously, you know, Paul Mescal, go on the lad.
Well,
From Maynooth as well, which even better. But yeah, Paul Mescal I think is really good in this. I think it's cool for him to get a role like this, because not that he was necessarily typecast or anything, but it's just interesting for him to go from such like gripping emotional human dramas like All of Us Strangers and Aftersun to then do Gladiator 2. It's like, oh, the guy is actually like able to transcend genre and do whatever he wants, really. That being said, I do think like obviously his roles in Aftersun and All of Us Strangers are far more challenging than his role in Gladiator 2. I still think he does a phenomenal job. And I watched The Death of Stalin randomly.
Oh, that's
good.
so good. I love that.
Yeah, it's good actually. Yeah, I just randomly stuck it on one night.
I'm a big Armando Iannucci fan. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. I had a chat with a guy in work who I actually know watches the podcast. Shout out Evan. And we came to the same conclusion. It's like, yeah, I feel like if I like knew more about the subject, I'd find it hilarious. But even on a surface level, knowing very little, I'm still like, this is great.
Yeah.
But
there's
I feel like if I was like,
I love how this lampoons like that era of Russian like politics and Russian whatever bureaucracy. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. I just wish I was more informed is the only thing. And then I think if I was to watch like a documentary or something on Russia in that time period, I would so come back to The Death of Stalin and rewatch it and almost definitely enjoy it even more, I think. But besides them three, the only one I want to shout out that I watched that I also have covered in the recent 12 classic French films that I watched is Rafifi, because I watched it most recently out of the lot. Everyone needs to see Rafifi. It's like an essential movie. Like, if anyone likes Reservoir Dogs, you have to see Rafifi and you have to see City on Fire. City on Fire is obviously the film that like quite blatantly inspired Reservoir Dogs. It's from Hong Kong from the late 80s. It's amazing. It's one of the best cop movies ever made. And then you've got Rafifi, which is from France from the 50s. Jules Dassin or Julius Dassin, don't care how you call him. He's class. I've also seen another one of his films. We covered The Naked City. I covered that. I talked about it briefly on a podcast episode. But Rafifi is like one of the best heist movies ever made. And
I love a heist film.
It's so ballsy because there's just it's not a spoiler, but the middle of the film is like just like 25 minutes with no music and no dialogue. It's the heist, and it's just them breathing, and they are fucking bricking it the whole time. But it works so well. Like there's literally no sound except for like them breathing and like the odd like bumping into a shelf and everything. Like, but like there's no talking, there's no music. It's so expertly crafted, and yeah, goddamn, you want to talk about a final shot? Whoa, yeah. As I said, it's a movie that where people fuck around and find out. And that's the best. It's the best way of describing the movie without getting into spoilers or anything. But yeah, genuinely one of the best heist movies ever made. And yeah, everybody, Rafifi is like literally essential viewing. What about you?
No, I love a heist film. I'm going to check that out for sure. No, I've also seen Paddington in Peru and Gladiator 2. I did like both, although I can't say I was blown away by either, but I did enjoy both. I did see another Michael Curtiz film, Angels with Dirty Faces from 1938.
Oh yeah, I want to watch that actually.
Yeah, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, Pat O'Brien. I actually thought it was really, really great. It's kind of the story of two childhood friends who go on diverge in wildly different paths. So they're involved in this crime as well, petty crime. It's not a major crime, but it's a petty crime as kids. One of them gets caught, the other one doesn't, and one of them ends up going into a life of crime, and the other one becomes a priest. And it becomes this whole moral kind of divide. It's posing as a gangster film, which it is to an extent, but very much it's more so the local kids are starting to be seduced by this gangster guy who's like, they see him as kind of a local hero, a local legend, and the priest, he still likes his old friend, but he realizes he's concerned that they're kind of going to go down the same path as him, and they're going to be seduced into a life of crime, a life of notoriety. So he's trying to, it's like the push and pull of these two different forces. And in the meantime, you have Humphrey Bogart as a shady ass lawyer who, like, he's just on the outskirts of the film, pulling strings everywhere. It's really compelling stuff. So yeah, shout out to Angels with Dirty Faces. So
I'm gonna watch that.
It's really fun. It's a really, really good film, especially the last 10 minutes in particular. I won't spoil it, but yeah, the last 10 minutes are really, really, like, it's a great payoff. Key Largo, also a Humphrey Bogart film directed by John Huston. That kind of like in a secluded, remote location where there's this hurricane, I think, or maybe it's a tornado. I think it's a hurricane outside, but has our boy Edward G. Robinson as a gangster.
Oh, don't tempt me. Don't tempt me. I'm gonna have to watch that as well.
And Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall in like the third or fourth film they made together. It's like those two had insane chemistry. Spoiler, they were married. It's a good film. Like, I think I expected to like it more than I did, but I actually can see it going up in a rewatch now that I kind of know the different story beats, if that makes sense. Like, I was probably expecting a little bit to be a little bit of a different film than it ends up being. Edward G. Robinson in particular just kills it in this film though. The Nightmare Before Christmas, somehow.
Oh yeah, good. Good film.
Somehow I've never seen it before. Very fun, very offbeat. It's just my kind of animated film. Like, Tim Burton can be hit or miss for me, but when he hits, he does really hit. Obviously, it's not him. I want to give a shout out to Harry Selick because he did direct the film. But you can see Tim Burton's crazy kind of crazy mind at play in this whole thing. So it's a fun Christmas film. It does work equally as well as a Halloween film. So I think you can watch it neither. Finally, another Humphrey Bogart film, To Have and Have Not, directed by Howard Hawks. Yeah, so this, by the way, is the first time that Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart met each other. They met each other on this film. Oh. Yeah, she was 19, he was 44, so quite an age gap, obviously. But they fell in love, and man, the chemistry that they have on screen is crazy. Like, you can see that they've just they instantly had that connection. And obviously they went on to marry each other, be in a bunch of films together, had a kid together, whatever. Had a very, very happy life until his untimely death. But yeah, it's a very fun film, very Casablanca vibes. Yeah. It's been compared a lot to Casablanca, and while I think Casablanca is undoubtedly a better film, like, it definitely shares a lot of DNA with Casablanca, and Bogey's character is very similar to his character in Casablanca. So no, it's definitely worth the watch, especially if you've seen Casablanca and you like Casablanca. So yeah, seen a few Bogey films. Obviously, that might tell people something maybe coming up. Yeah, but yeah, that's
yeah. It's probably out before now, anyway.
Yeah, chances are, maybe not. But yeah, I'm gonna try and spoiler. I'm gonna try and get a Humphrey Bogart film out. I'm gonna try and get a Humphrey Bogart video out for people to watch fairly soon.
Yeah, I would assume it's out because we're like 3 weeks ahead now.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I'd say it probably. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's White Christmas, and next week is the episode. The episode a lot of people have been waiting for, I'm sure. The episode we've been alluding to pretty much since the podcast began. It's a Wonderful Life, and that's all I'm gonna say. Yeah, next week is It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, probably the classic Christmas film, like, from this era. Don't think there's any.
Yeah, for sure.
Necessarily. Yeah. So I'm sure everyone's seen it. It's a Wonderful Life, I'm sure. Crazy enough, I hadn't seen it until about a year ago. So we'll get into all that next week, though. Yeah, but that's been White Christmas, directed by Michael Curtiz. Yeah, first musical we've covered in the podcast, and sure not the last. But yeah, that's been White Christmas. And yeah, we're halfway now into our Christmas arc on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. So we'll see you next week for It's a Wonderful Life. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and see you next week.
Yeah, I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Devaney.
Goodbye.
See you later.